Could you imagine walking to school, having to be escorted by police officers because crowds are surrounding the entrances, ranting and yelling at you to go back where you belong? They had more courage than most of us will ever amount to. They felt more hatred than anyone should ever feel. We treated them as no one should be treated. We treated them like animals. In 1950, 13 black families sent their children to schools in white neighborhoods. When the admission of these students was rejected, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People filed a lawsuit against the Board of Education in Topeka, Kansas. Linda Brown was one of these 13 children who attempted to enter the schools. Linda Brown was merely a child sentenced to disaster. At the end of the trial, Chief Justice Earl Warren stated, "Segregated schools are not equal and cannot be made equal, and hence they are deprived of the equal protection of the laws." This ruling landmark began our nation's long journey towards school desegregation. Starting in the 1890s, states throughout the South passed laws designed to prevent black citizens from improving their status or gaining equality. These rules, which together were known as Jim Crow, were in place and enforced until the 1950s and 60s. The Supreme Court ended school segregation 3 years earlier in the decision of Brown v. Board of Education of Topeka. But Arkansas Governor Orville E. Faubus refused to accept the court's authority over his states. Have you ever heard of the Little Rock Nine? On September 4, 1957, Governor Orville Faubus defied the court, calling in the Arkansas National Guard to prevent 9 African American students from entering the building. 10 days later, in a meeting with President Eisenhower, Faubus agreed to use the National Guard to protect the African American teenagers, but on returning to Little Rock, he dismissed the troops, leaving the students exposed to an angry white mob. Within hours, the jeering, brick-throwing mob had beaten several reporters and smashed many of the school's windows and doors. By noon, local police were forced to evacuate the 9 students. Most of the time, things happen in a chain reaction. All you need is that one domino piece to start it. Recalling Ruby Bridges shouldn't be too hard. At the age of 15, I cannot picture myself going into situations some of these kids had the courage to do. I can barely speak in front of a class of 10 students, let alone keep my head held high and walk through angry mobs. Ruby went through racial mocking and threats during her first year. Her father was fired from his job, and before the end of the year, all the white students had left the school. By the second year of integration, the crowds of angry protesters outside the schools had dispersed. Now, I can't say I have ever been harassed in the same manner as these students, but I do know what it's like to be mocked because of your race or background. There is no elaborate story, just a few times where the true color of people come out and you see the true intentions they have. I was in 3rd grade, maybe 9 years old, and living in Texas. Now, usually Texas is one of the friendliest places I can think of. Mostly everyone gets along. Culture, heritage, and race don't define you. San Antonio, the city I used to live in, is predominantly Hispanics, and never before had I ever received any rude remarks, and this one compared to what black citizens received back then was barely anything. But the fact that the person saying it was the same age as me made me really think, wow, what do you learn at home? It was sometime in the afternoon after lunch, and our teacher was going to give us a snack, and this girl thought it would be fun to compare everyone's race to snack food, like we were some type of matching game. She described herself first as a cracker, being that she was white, I had assumed. She then went on to point out my friend Michela was like an Oreo, with her dad being black and her mother being white. When she got to me, I figured it couldn't be that bad of a comparison, although it really wasn't a comparison at all. It was more of an insult. She looked me straight in the face and said, "You remind me of a mocha coffee because of that ugly brown color it has." 6 years later, I still remember that day. I went home crying on the bus. That moment played over and over in my mind. A person I thought was my friend had actually just said that to me. Now, it obviously was not as severe as what kids during the school integration had to go through, but it makes me think, what compels us to treat one another like this? Why do we feel the need to put each other down just to boost our own self-confidence? I don't understand. I don't understand it or why we do it. I don't understand how someone who has been treated this way could go and do it to someone else. I don't understand why we think it's right to treat each other like this. In a sense of religion, we are all brothers and sisters, living on this world to better each other and ourselves. People who believe they are above others are wrong. We were all created equal and together, not equal but separate. Because is separation really equality? The question no one seems to ask themselves is, where is this coming from? Where we come from, our background, cultures, and the people we surround ourselves with, that's where it's coming from. I have watched my brother pick up things that my parents and I are constantly doing, and they aren't the quality traits you would wish for him to have. And when you see him at only 4 years old making those decisions that one day will have major consequences, I feel like it's almost my responsibility to help him fix it. His generation shouldn't have these constant misfortunes like we do now. My wish for my brother is that one day he won't have to worry about his background, that some little third grader isn't going to put him down or make him feel insecure because he isn't like them. The anger and hate we have been throwing around for the past 100 years is repulsive. We aren't born with hatred in our hearts, we are taught it, and that is what needs to change.